Hi, nice to see you, Brett. Okay, up and running. Hi guys, good evening. What's up, everybody? Good to see everybody tonight. Yeah. Cool. If anybody's attending the workshop tonight, you're welcome to join us over here. Feel free to turn the chairs, hang out. But we're gonna get rocking and rolling here. So welcome everybody. Good evening. My name is Dr. Evan Frizzle. It's great to have you guys all here today. Tonight we get to talk about breathing and breath work. Who's excited? You're like, Doc, I've been breathing for 50 years. Why do I need to learn how to do it different? Say that again, through. Yeah. So the crazy part about diving into this, so really what we're talking about tonight is this book called Breathe by the name of, or the author's name is James Nestor. It's some really cool stuff. I would encourage you guys to check it out. It's really, really interesting read. But that's where a lot of this information is going to be coming from. That combined with our background and knowledge on chronic diseases and spinal biomechanics and breathing mechanics. And ultimately, we are here to bless you guys with knowledge so that way we can all help each other, help our family members, help our loved ones get unstuck, be less dependent upon the system, and help our body do a better job for ourselves. Does that sound good? Cool. All right, guys. So let's dive in. Okay, why we're here, breath work or abnormal breathing mechanics really contributes to like every aspect of variable chronic diseases, because what's one of the foundational principles of life, guys? We have to be able to what? Breathe, the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. It's kind of foundational to everything else. It's, you know, if we take more of an evolutionary perspective, we had microbes that had to learn how to interact with the air in the environment in order to convert oxygen into energy, which is called aerobic respiration or aerobic metabolism. Figure out how to utilize oxygen so that we can get out of the water and start walking on land. Okay? At least that's the theory. So if we're not doing that job sufficiently, and we are breathing roughly around 20,000 times a day, then that inefficiency will lead to what? Problems. Yeah, problems over time, right? And so tonight, guys, what we want to help you guys to do is understand a little bit more about breathing mechanics, what a healthy breath looks like, how it's going to ultimately influence and drive various pain responses, fatigues, anxieties, and then learn 3, 4, 10 various practices over the next 6 hours. Thank you. So you figure out how to start to help yourselves, okay? So guys, we're going to be breathing in the new year. So first, we're just going to do a micro check-in with ourselves, and you know, this will require good participation. You're like, no, doctor, come to your lectures to listen and sit in the back and not interact with anyone. Well, tonight's going to be a little different, okay? So micro check-in for the next 20, 30 seconds, we're just going to be kind of still, and we're going to kind of pay attention to what parts of our body do we feel moving. So if anyone wants to put one hand on their chest, one hand on their abdomen, just spend the next 20, 30 seconds focusing on your breath. And pay attention to whether you're breathing through your nose or your mouth, and just do what innately comes natural to you currently. See if your abdomen's moving, see if your chest is moving, see what muscles are tightening up, see which muscles are not tightening up. So you may feel a little bit more activation either in the neck or in the shoulders. You should feel some activation in the abdomen. You may notice that your rib cage is expanding. So now that we've done that for about 10, 15 seconds, anybody want to share how they breathe? What do we feel? So show of hands, who felt their chest move more than their belly? Okay. Who felt their belly move more than their chest? Cool. Sorry, the belly breathers have it, guys. Who here felt tension in the shoulders or the neck? Yeah. Who here felt tension in the rib cage and in the oblique tissue? Okay. So this is our default programming, or what we've become accustomed to, and kind of what we do automatically for ourselves. And so if that's normal or abnormal, we will figure it out this evening. And then we can start to make slight modifications to change that mechanics of that breath work, because it ultimately has a huge impact on your cardiovascular system, your immune system, your management of your glycemic index, meaning like your blood sugar levels. It has a big impact on your nervous system as well. Okay. So welcome to Roots. I believe I recognize every face here, so it's a great pleasure to have you guys here. Except Schultz as well. Great pleasure to have you guys. So my name is Dr. Evan. If you don't know, I'm the owner and founder of True Roots Health Center. We have an amazing team here, and we specialize in helping people to fix all sorts of interesting chronic illnesses and diseases without medications and surgeries. Yeah, cool. Thank you for that feedback. So part of our mission is to partner with you guys in the community to provide knowledge, hope, healing, and understanding so that way we can start to make a difference, right? I'm going to kind of go backwards a little bit because this is called our Be Hard to Kill seminar series. We've done a different advanced topic almost every month this entire calendar year. So if you guys want to dive deep in any of this research and literature with us, we will be redoing this in the next calendar year. New topic every month. And if there's something in particular that's like on your heart, your minds that you want me to research for you and do something like this for you, we'd be happy to do that. So if there's a specific topic that you're interested in, please let me know. Also, who's come to one of these in the past? Not an ego thing, but has the time spent doing this been valuable to you?
Yeah, that's all we're at.
Cool, that's exactly right. Okay. Who here would think that this information would be valuable to other people? Yes. Okay. So my ask of you guys tonight is that if you know have family members, loved ones, if you want to take a TED-style health talk like this and get it out in the community, whether it's at your church or your business, you want us to bring food and we can spend, 15 minutes, an hour together, however you want to structure that. That is what we are hoping to achieve in the next calendar year. And so I invite you to help us to make a bigger impact. Cool? Cool. All right. So we're going to start a little bit backwards, guys, because we start every talk this way. Okay. Show of hands. Who here believes your body's a self-adapting, self-healing organism? Good. So what happened? So we have the body should be a self-adapting, self-healing organism, but we have variable environmental cues and stressors that impact our body's ability to do its job, right? And all living mechanical systems eventually what? Engineering and physicists fail. Yeah, we're not going to be Jesus sometime, right? So the stress applied to the system is going to influence, or our body, the stressors applied to the system is going to influence how much inflammatory load our body incurs. And then what happens at a molecular level, okay? So if our body's in a chronic stress-induced state, what happens to our system? Does it break down faster? Yeah, cool. What if our body's exceptionally good at adapting to stress? Breaks down a little slower, right? And so that's what chiropractic care does for you. That's what good nutrition does for you. That's what exercise does for you. That's what prayer and meditation does for you. That's what breathing mechanics does for you. It makes the body more resilient. It makes it more efficient at adapting to the world and the environment and healing itself. So if we have an incredibly high stress load, we need to have an incredibly high resiliency, right? And most of the time in our society, we take a position of fear and avoidance of, I'm just not going to do that anymore, or I'm not going to engage in that activity, or that person sneezed on me and they have germs and now I'm sick. It's not quite the way things work, right? So we need to be highly adaptable organisms in order to adapt to variable stressors in our world. And would you guys agree with me, show of hands, that our environment is a little bit more stressful now than it was 30, 40 years ago? Just a tad, right? We look at agricultural practices, if we look at just, well, I don't tell you this, but the way the world is, right? So that's why, again, this topic is going to help you to get a better perspective, because if our whole objective is to prevent the progression of disease or prevent disease from showing up in the first place, we really have to start upstream and understanding how our body interacts with the environment and how we adapt to stress. Okay? Cool with that? Cool. And so that's why we're going to talk about breathing today. Okay, so myth one, the more air I suck in, the more oxygen I get. Yes or no? Who thought that previously? Come on, be honest. Yeah. Right? Yeah. But there's a certain level of perfusion in the body, and there's an affinity for oxygen, and we can't get above, or if we do get below, it becomes quite concerning. Right? But that's not necessarily true. Myth number two, carbon dioxide is just toxic waste. It is not. Actually, carbon dioxide has a more important role than oxygen does in your system. I know, right? That's not what I was talking about. And super important thing that we're going to talk about tonight is CO2 intolerance. Okay, because this is really driving a lot of the anxieties and the stressors that a lot of us are experiencing. Myth number three, mouth breathing is fine as long as I get the air in. Some people will communicate that, and that is not necessarily true. Chronic mouth breathing is going to increase the likelihood of infections. It's going to cause facial distortions. It's going to cause all sorts of interesting issues for people, which we'll dive into a little bit more in depth here. So this is the work that we're talking about tonight. James Nestor, he ran a really cool experiment. Well, he's been running multiple experiments on himself over the last decade or so. But one of the really cool ones listed in the book is him and a guy by the name of Olsen, this Swedish dude. They basically jammed a bunch of stuff up their nose and taped their nose down, and they breathed them out for 10 days. And they evaluated their pulse ox, they evaluated their perfusion rates, they evaluated infection rates, they looked at blood chem, they looked at all sorts of cool testing. Over a 10-day window of time, this forced mouth breathing actually caused him to develop snoring, sleep apnea, and hypertension. Yeah, elevated his blood pressure. When Nestor plugged the nose for 10 days, only mouth breathed, his snoring increased by almost 5,000%, and he started to have 25 apneic events per day, and his oxygen dropped below 85%. So full-on sleep apnea was created in 10 days through mouth breathing. Crazy, right? After that, they did a restoration through various breathwork activities over a 10-day window of time, and they were able to reverse all the findings. Pretty cool. So how did this stuff happen? Okay, we're kind of going to balance between, different theorems in the world. But back in the day, Paleolithic ancestry, if you notice the shape of the skull, do you notice how the orbits are much wider? Do you notice how the maxillary bones are much more horizontal and longer and wider, versus these kind of take more of a curved appearance? Do you notice how the airway is actually wider? The teeth have more space. So back in the day, Paleolithic ancestry, we were munching down on all sorts of hard stuff, and we were breathing through our nose all the time. We're also being extremely active. So the loss of, or going through agricultural practices and industrialization, we have progressively made our food softer, easier to digest, easier to consume, more commercialized, right? Versus non-on-dairy foods. Okay? So the result of this, with that loss of mechanical compression and that repetitive load and stress applied to joint, tissue, and muscle, our airways have started to narrow over the last millennia. And so the average measurements of the orbit and the airway of the nose and the mandible and the maxilla have all shrunk over time. And it's not a genetic shift, it's a epigenetic expression. We're no longer applying a certain stress to the body that we did in the past, and so our body's adapting to that lack of stress, right? And so that's why we're starting to see just this massive increase. And if you talk to pulmonologists or orthodontists or people that work with this, it's currently estimated that 90% of the population has this problem going on, these narrowed airways, narrowed maxilla. We have a few of the professionals in the crowd right now, and they are nodding their heads with me, so cool. That statistic is accurate. Thank you. So,
you notice that skull is not just wider, also taller.
Yep. And
He's just bigger.
But if you look, so they,
What that is, wider and taller is bigger.
fair enough. However, they have done about 300,000 of these studies, and they've looked at old skulls. If they go to Paris, the catacombs underneath, and they've been taking skulls there and looking and doing mass measurements. So it's not one-off event.
If you compared me to an average football player, you'd probably discover he has bigger orbits and his arms are bigger than my legs, and he can probably breathe better.
Potentially. But
Maybe
I would say
that's
that
why he can charge to a crowd.
fair enough, but I would say it's probably also proportional to the population. So, but if you want to check it out, feel free to read it, sir. Hidden costs of bad breathing, mouth breathing, and shallow chest breathing are linked to higher blood pressures, heart strain, anxieties, panics, feeling on edge, chronic pain, neck tension, headaches, jaw pain, jaw issues, fatigue, brain fog, poor sleep quality, metabolic disease, weight gain, and even cancers. Okay. So the breathing mechanics, how the body actually works. So when we, and this is kind of boring part, but when we inhale, ideally it should be going through the nose and through these things called turbinates. Okay, these guys help moisten the air. They help to remove allergens and toxins out of the air. Excuse me. And then that goes into the trachea, into the lungs, and all the way down into the alveoli, which is right here. And that's where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occur. Breathing is also heavily neurologically influenced. The part of the nervous system that does this for us is specifically located here at the brainstem, right? Which is also a really important thing that we talked to you guys about in reference to your spinal corrective postures, curvatures, and neurology, right? Because there are something called chemoreceptors and baroreceptors. Chemoreceptors help us to understand chemistry. Baroreceptors help us to understand pressures. Okay, so pressure gradients is how the lungs work. Chemoreceptors is the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the body. So those two feedback mechanisms help the brain to tell the body to speed up or slow down in reference to breathing and respiration rate. Cool. So one of the most important aspects of this is something called your diaphragm. This big old muscle that separates your upper half and your lower half. When you breathe in, the diaphragm flattens, the ribs move up, and the lungs expand. When you breathe out, the diaphragm is supposed to push up, because what you'll hear in just a second, if I can get volume to work, is that the lungs work on pressure gradients. That air moves to lower volumes. So if I have less oxygen in my lungs and I expand the lungs, oxygen is going to rush into the lungs based upon volume of particle size. Okay, and then there's going to expand and go out similarly. So that's what this is talking about here. It goes from high concentration to low concentration. And it's all in reference to the neurology, the diaphragm, the movement of the rib cage, and the movement of the thoracic spine. Okay. So if we do breathe through our nose appropriately, this helps us to filter out dust, germs, and allergens. It helps warm and humidify the air as it hits the lungs. It helps release nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a really amazing molecule that God gave us. It helps to reverse and repair the cardiovascular system pretty intensely. And if we do breathe through our nose, it increases nitric oxide production 15-fold is what the research shows us. Okay. We commonly help people here with a condition called peripheral neuropathy. Okay? Deficiency of nitric oxide is a really big player in that game because we don't have enough nitric oxide in our system. The peripheral blood vessels, like the capillaries, they start to break down. And we don't get enough blood and oxygen to our tissues. And then the nerve tissue starts to die. And people start to have ascending nervous system type issues where they feel pins and needles and burning and tingling. So nasal breathing or nose breathing maybe a piece of that puzzle and a contributing factor for the dimension of production of nitric oxide, but also it's heavily dietarily influenced as well. The diaphragm is the main muscle for breathing. It's dome-shaped. Again, it flattens in domes based upon the mechanics of our body, which is why earlier I had you touch your neck and your abdomen, because when you breathe in, you should really pull from the lower abdomen. The abdomen has to expand for the diaphragm to come down and for the lungs to inflate. But if we're not using the diaphragm, the abdomen to breathe, then most of us are going to be going. And then we're doing, 20,000 shoulder shrugs a day. And by the end of the day, it's like, honey, can you rub my shoulders? They're all tight and stressed out, right? Because we've been using the wrong tissues to perform a certain mechanical movement of the body. And the expansion of the ribs and the spine, the mechanics of that are very, very important to your health and your well-being and your ability to breathe and exchange oxygen. Also, super cool side note in reference to breathing, when you breathe, your occiput and your sacrum both move too. When the occiput and sacrum move, this helps pump cerebrospinal fluid around the nervous system. This is now being discussed as lymphatic movement. Neurologists, neurosurgeons, there's a ton of data coming out on this right now. The mechanics of the occiput and the sacrum help pump that cerebrospinal fluid around the nervous system. If we don't have cerebrospinal fluid circulating through the nervous system, we can't flush waste out of the nervous system. Okay, and we get a bit of crap in the brain. And then it's like, my brain's not working so well anymore. Cool. So science in 60 seconds. On average, right now, adults are breathing 12 to 20 times a minute. However, studies show us that if we can breathe 5 to 6 times a minute, your HRV scores, your vagal tone, all of those measures of health are going to dramatically improve. So how do we get that accomplished?
It's pretty deeper.
Kind of. We have to breathe less and we have to breathe slower. The amount of air that you're physically taking in, you almost have to sip the air versus take a big deep inhale. Okay? Because I've been doing this now for the last 3 days and trying to mentally make myself do it, especially when I'm in the middle of talking and adjusting. I'm like, okay, I'm definitely breathing at 1.5 seconds. I got to slow things down to regulate my body. But this does increase heart rate variability or our resilience to the environment and to our nervous system. It improves in its resiliency. It'll lower blood pressure. It'll calm inflammation down. Your C-reactive protein, like you see on your blood chemistry, will start to reduce. You'll see improvements in anxieties and emotional regulation as well. So if you can slow down to 5.5 second inhale, 5.5 second exhale, you will see really cool health benefits. So we already covered this, but mouth breathing ultimately is going to lead to dry mouth gum issues, bad breath, more snoring, apnea, poor oxygen utilization, fatigue, anxieties, and forward head postures and type of mandibular joint issues. Does your spine play a role?
Always.
Who's shocked that you're in a chiropractor's office? We're going to talk about this spine, right? Okay. So this is actually a really cool pre and post study from our office. This gentleman's done a fantastic job with his spinal corrective care as well as the reversal of his peripheral neuropathy. But what's really important to understand is called our sagittal balance. One of literally the fourth leading cause of disability and worsening health scores across the world is something called adult spinal deformity, ASD. And I would say roughly 50% of the people we x-ray have. Okay. It outperforms, and they did the study on SF-36 scores, which basically measures the quality of your life. And people with ASD rate poor quality of life, health, and performance than people with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, with heart failure, and with cancer. So if your spine is trashed, it dramatically impacts every aspect of your life. But this gentleman had adult spinal deformity prior to starting care. If the head is more than 50 millimeters forward in front of the butt, it's a real big problem for mechanics and neurology and your ability to resist gravity and do life. So this is where spinal chiropractic or chiropractic biomechanics or chiropractic biophysics comes into play. We need to work on remodeling the thoracic cavity or the rib cage because that's going to influence pressure gradients on the lungs. The more rounded the rib cage, the more pressure and the harder it is to inhale and pull the diaphragm down. Also for men and ladies, if the rib cage is overtly rounded to 60 degrees, it can contribute to things like bladder and uterine prolapse because it starts to put pressure on the top of the fundus of the uterus and the bladder and short circuits those systems as well. There are various radiographic cutoff points in order to figure out if you have adult spinal deformity because you can't typically see it. You have to x-ray it. And kind of a really fun little side tangent is that chiropractors are losing their x-ray rights across the world. Like we're supposed to be spinal care specialists, but we're not allowed to x-ray people in places like Canada and Australia, and they're trying to take that away. So I don't quite know how to help fix your spine if I don't have a blueprint of knowing the starting and ending points. So kind of an interesting thing. These are all examples of cases from our office. Okay, a lot of these people came in with minor back pain. Okay. Symptoms are not the best assessment of health and well-being. We have to base it on performance, function, longevity. Okay. So again, the distance from here forward, if this is greater than 50 millimeters, it's a big problem. If the rate of this thoracic curvature is greater than 60 degrees, it's a big problem. If the pelvic incidence angle is less than 25 degrees, it's a big problem because all these measurements, they just add up and tell us that your system's failing. Okay. It will not last in the environment. The ability to prevent disease is to be resilient and upright and resisting gravity and moving and doing all the things that you want to do. Okay? And does adult spinal deformity just affect adults? No. It's just the cutoff markers are for people 18 and up. This is an 11-year-old girl from our office. Okay? Pain with chronic headaches and migraines. Could you potentially guess why? If green is ideal and red is her spine, what do we notice, guys? How's the neck look? The curve the right way? It's curved the wrong way, isn't it? Yep. So over a 5/8/24, 10/22/25, I wish we could magically do this in one visit. Doesn't quite work that way. Okay, tissue changes with load over time. We were able to see a 14-degree reversal in her curvature, which if this falls below 20 degrees in the right direction, it starts to cause issues with the brain. To 5.5 degrees in the right direction. So that was a 21-degree improvement. Pretty impressive. And then also just remap her spinal column to prevent those issues from showing up in the future, because if that was not addressed now at 11 years of age, where do you think she would be at 40 or 50?
You think it has something to do with that?
Absolutely it does. Yes. Load over time, right? My body is going to use the least amount of energy to do what I'm asking it to do on a routine basis. So if I ask it to do this for 12 hours a day, it is going to adapt and modify to this posture to use the least amount of energy to do that. It's just a dysfunctional posture. It hurts you in the long run. So self-assessment, we already went through this. Okay, pay attention to what's expanding. Okay, self-assessment 2. What we want to do is start to count. Okay, guys, so we're gonna be quiet here for just a second. We're gonna take 30 seconds, and all I want you to do is just count how many times you breathe in 30 seconds. Ready, set, go. About 30, what do we get? 5, 8, 6. Everybody's intentionally trying really hard not to break it. So whatever the number is that you guys got, multiply it by 2. Okay, and that's your average breaths per minute. Okay. Ideally, we want that to be 10. 10 or less, because if we do it in intervals of 5 seconds on, 5 seconds off, that'll get us 5.5 seconds. That'll get us close to a full 10 respirations. Okay. So that's ideally what we want to be shooting for. But as we're up, moving around, but this also applies to like when we're walking and running and trying to restrict oxygen intake during those activities. Over breathing or breathing too fast or too much, specifically through the mouth, is a severe problem because it contributes to something called CO2 intolerance, or the constant urge to sigh or breathe deeply. Okay. Good news is retraining this is not too terribly difficult. CO2 is not a waste product. It actually controls the drive and need to breathe and helps oxygen get from the blood into the tissues. Okay. If we have an oversaturation of oxygen, oxygen just rides on hemoglobin through the entire cardiovascular system and never gets deposited into tissue. So we actually, the higher our carbon dioxide levels, the more affinity, the more hunger our tissue has for oxygen, and the more easily and readily available it is to utilize for our body. So many of us who are CO2 intolerant, cyclically overbreathe, feel anxious, dizzy, and fatigued. Nestor and other experts talked about how CO2 intolerance is not a lack of oxygen. It's not actually a lack of oxygen that's affecting us. So,
I mean, so if you, how do you increase the CO2? Is that your? Okay. All right.
we'll chat that here in just a second. Slow nasal breathing and gentle breath holds build your CO2 fitness over time. Okay? And there's different ways to get that accomplished. Most of us are taught that carbon dioxide is a waste product and we need to get rid of it. That's not necessarily true. It's one of the main signaling responses. It helps raise, if CO2 rises in blood, it tells your brain, okay, it's time to take the next breath. And it tells the hemoglobin to let oxygen go. Right? Otherwise, it'll stay bonded to the hemoglobin and won't get into the tissues. Many people today are CO2 intolerant, though, and that means their brain overreacts to normal or slightly elevated CO2 levels. So if CO2 does rise because it is slightly uncomfortable, that is going to put you into a fight or flight or stressed response, which is going to contribute to our anxieties and our issues that we've been talking about this evening. So the natural reactions start to overbreathe, but that actually makes the problem worse. Think of your asthmas, right? People that are in an asthmatic attack, they feel like they can't get enough oxygen into their body, and so they start breathing excessively harder, and then everything spasms tight, right? If we can teach them to slow their breath down, and actually breathe less and increase their carbon dioxide levels, which does feel slightly like strangulation, then you'll have a higher affinity for oxygen and you'll be able to pass oxygen into the body, right? So good news is this is trainable, right? So we can do a CO2 sensitivity check together right now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna close our mouth, we're gonna breathe gently through our nose for a few breaths. We're gonna take a normal, relaxed nasal inhale, so just a normal breath, not that you're trying too hard. Now we're gonna take a relaxed exhale, and at the end of that exhale, please pinch your nose and hold your breath. And then count slowly in your mind. Pay attention to how quickly your brain screams, I need to breathe right now. And don't push it, don't strain it, but when you feel this strong urge to breathe, just release and take your normal breath, but this is your CO2 tolerance. So as soon as you start to feel that, you'll know it when you feel it. That's your CO2 threshold. So you want to have that number in your mind, and that's your baseline, and that's what you want to start to expand. Does that make sense? Does everyone want to go through this together?
Yes.
Cool, awesome. So everybody just go ahead and exhale normally through your nose. And then hold your breath, plug your nose, and start the count in your head. No heroes. I don't want anybody passing out. Okay. Yep. You start to feel it energy. You know that feeling? You're like, all right, it's time. I'm freaking out, man. Okay. But when we change that tolerance, some people's tolerance to CO2 is so very low that any discrepancy there is going to put their system into that fight or flight or anxious state. Okay. So here was like 10 seconds or less. Yeah, that's pretty good. Here was like 20 seconds or less. Okay. So there's our baseline thresholds, guys. And that's what we want to expand over time. You know, there's free divers that can use a single breath for about 10 minutes, and they're not genetically different. They have just increased their CO2 tolerance. And this is, if you study mammalian life of how like whales move through the body and how they shunt blood and oxygen to internal organ systems, we can kind of teach ourselves to do the same thing, which is really pretty cool. So CO2 tolerance training, how to build calm breathing fitness and raise your heart rate variability scores. What I'd really like to do is find a few of you that have persistently low HRV scores and do a trial and study on this in the office, because we measure your HRV scores every time you come in for your reassessments, right? So it'd be super cool if we have a consistent data pool of looking at your HRVs over time, where it's like 70 on the x-axis and 60 on the y-axis, and we start to do this for 2 to 4 weeks, and then we retest and see how you're doing. So if anybody wants to volunteer to do that, I'd be happy to do that with you. It'd be kind of cool. Jimmy, let me know. So step 1, foundation, daily nasal breathing, 5 minutes, 2 times a day. So we need to budget 10 minutes out of our day. In through the nose for 5.5 seconds, exhale out of the nose for 6 to 7 seconds. Keep it quiet, smooth, and low in the belly. Really cool part of this book talks about samurai and how samurai warriors were not graduated from their training until they could walk around for a full day with a feather under their nose without the feather moving, because of how methodical and slow and light their inhale and exhale was. I don't know, that was like really cool. And if you ever see that movie, it's called Ninja something. But the guy got like all destroyed and cut up, and then he practiced like this breathing exercise, and then he like regenerated his tissue really fast. I thought that was super cool when I was little, and I started reading this book. I was like, oh my gosh, that's what he was doing. It's called Tuomo or Tomo breathing, which we'll talk about here in a second. Yeah, that's it. You know what I'm talking about. All right. So step 2, gentle CO2 holds. So after a normal exhale, pinch the nose and hold for 3 to 5 seconds. This will start to increase the resiliency of that feedback mechanism of that like oxygen starvation, of that hunger of like, oh, I gotta breathe right now. Then do that 5 to 10 rounds, 1 to 2 times daily. And then slow that progression and lengthen that time over time, getting up to 10, 20, 30 seconds. But what's really important is that rebound breath, that when you go to like, you know, after that starvation, you want your rebound breath to be extremely light, extremely slow, not the you breathe again. Okay, you want to condition yourself to do that extremely slow and methodical. Okay, and if it feels easy, add another 1 or 2 seconds. Hold every couple of weeks. Stop before that strong air hunger sets in, or that panic or dizziness. Goal is to train comfort with mild CO2 rise and not to win or suffer. Depends on what paradigm you follow and which researcher you listen to and what the goal and objective of the training is. Okay. What I found really interesting about this 5.5 seconds inhale, exhale is that it is consistent across all religions and disciplines throughout history and time. That was really impactful to me. So they termed it the sacred breath or the perfect breath. What it does is it causes a coherence or a resonance, a synchronization and vibration of the heart, the lungs, and the nervous system, all simultaneously working towards the betterment of you. And so common, I don't know if they're called mantras. I've never studied Buddhism, but one of those common mantras in Buddhism is these acronyms together, and then the traditional Om. And whatever this is, it's this one. But in Catholicism and early Christianity, the Latin root of Ave Maria, when people are praying in unison, the synchronization of their breath will ultimately default into 5.5 seconds to 6 seconds. I thought that was so stinking cool. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a tale as old as time. And this is, again, you can find this across the world, and it's been measured and studied. So if you can, start to condition yourself 5.5 seconds on, 5.5 seconds off, which equates to about 10 breaths per minute, right? This Ukrainian guy did this really cool research as well and basically found the exact same thing. So he applied, though, Dr. Konstantin, a Ukrainian physician in the 1950s, helped patients with asthmas, anxieties, and chronic hyperventilation, as well as hypertension. And he was one of the early, Nestor talks about pulmonauts, people that research this stuff, because a lot of this has been tested and proved and then lost, and then tested and proved and then lost, and tested and proved and then lost. And it's never really gained a whole lot of momentum, but it's been consistent with time and history. But he basically came to find the exact same thing. So simple way that he does his is this before, or is this framework for you? So, but it's going to follow a very similar thing. After a normal exhalation, you want to try many pauses for 3 to 5 seconds, then inhale calmly, do 5 to 10 rounds in order to increase that CO2 tolerance. Alternating nose breathing, been doing this for a couple of days. That's pretty cool. So what you want to do is plug one nostril, breathe in through this side, exhale through this side, and then switch, inhale and exhale, and then switch. And it'll activate different part of the cortex and different part of the cerebellum. So like if you breathe through your left nostril, it will typically make you feel a bit more calm. And if you breathe through your right nostril, it'll typically ramp you up a little bit. Kind of cool because it messes with hemisphericities of the brain. Okay? So this is called alter nose breathing and balancing from left to right. Nose songs. So as you continue, this is also AKA snoring, just kidding. But as you do this, so what we want to do is breathe in and breathe out in those 5.5 second intervals. But if you can hum while you're doing this, the humming is the resonation of the vagus nerve, which helps the activation of the diaphragm. Your vagus nerve is responsible for keeping the body in something called homeostasis. It comes to cranial nerve 10, comes from the brain and the brainstem through a little hole in the bottom of the skull called the interjugular foramen. Goes over the throat, heart, lungs, stomach, all the way down to reproductive organs. Gentlemen, that's why when we get kicked in our nether regions, we feel sick to our stomach. Okay. So the vagus nerve really, really important for regulating the system. It's its own classification of the nervous system. It's called the enteric nervous system, and it helps your microbiome and the gut bacteria here, which releases 90% of the serotonin in your body, communicate hormones and neurotransmitters and chemicals to your brain. Okay? And then all these really cool research studies on animal studies with like mice and stuff, and they've cut out parts of their brain and they've given them cancer and done all sorts of things that jack up their system really bad. And nothing really made a significant difference in their behavioral patterns except severing their vagus nerve. Once they sever their vagus nerve, it just caused severe dysregulation of the system compared to all the other disease processes exposed to these animals to. So the vagus nerve is incredibly impactful. But no songs. So because of the inhalation, exhalation, and the resonance of the diaphragm, we can increase nitric oxide production and activation 15-fold, which is hugely beneficial to anybody suffering cardiovascular issues, arterial and atherosclerosis. Nobel Prize winning study in the 1990s shows that if you can upregulate your nitric oxide levels, you can actually start to reverse arterial and atherosclerosis in the body. Cool, because it helps repair the endothelium, the lining of the blood vessels, restores elasticity to that system. Kids, I'm not sure about you guys, but because of, well, how many people, well, how many children do you think are not breastfed? Significant portion, right? Breastfeeding is a really important developmental process that develops suck, swallow, latch, the development of the tongue, the development of the arch, that initial mechanical suction and compression that starts to form and help these structures develop tone and function. And so in a lot of these infants that have difficulty nursing, we put them on, just what's the term? It's the nipples that are like way easier to pull fluid through. But basically they make nipples now that, or the rubber nipples, that don't really require babies to work that hard to get the food out, right? Which is kind of a cool thing.
Like a floor nipple?
Yeah, thank you. In reference to like failure to thrive.
It's not something I recommend.
Yes. Basically, it's like a bigger hole and it requires much work from the infant. So
Or parents just cut holes in them.
cut holes in it. Yeah, so it gives them a high caloric intake, but they're basically just, it's like we're standing under a trough and just letting the food come in, right? We're not having to work with it. And that work is what helps build those mild oral facial structures. So kids are having a really difficult time with this, especially with all the tethered oral tissues that influence the movement of the tongue. So if your children are mouth breathers, the probability is you will see actually in every single child that was referenced in this study, once they fixed mouth breathing, ADD went out the window. Behavioral issues went out the window. Bedwetting went out the window. Yes?
Is there anything connected to how long the breasts have?
Because it used to be 2 to 4 years, and now we're lucky to get 6 months. Okay. And then after we breastfeed, we want to ideally switch to how adorable is that? Baby-led weaning. Okay. Because typically, as we transition them from breastfed babies, we start to give them a whole bunch of purees, soft, pre-digested, pre-broken down food that require them to do zero work or mastication, which further propagates the problem. So the sooner we can get them starting to gnaw on some solids, the faster we'll get development of this process. I like this one down here because our baby's jaw, sash, and airways are still stone-aged hardware living in a soft food world. To help them grow wide, strong faces and healthy airways like the skulls pictured previously, we want feeding that encourages chewing, nasal breathing, and good tongue postures, whether you use baby-led weaning or not. But baby-led weaning is very, very, there's a lot of good data on it, okay? So how does this show up in real life? Parents, if you see this in your kids, sleeping with their mouth open, drool on a pillow, chapped lips, dark circles under their eyes, restless sleepers who toss and turn, have night terrors and bedwetting, hyperactive, impulsive, or spacey and daydreaming in school settings, or starting to show a very narrowed palate with very crowded teeth and a recessed chin. These are all your key indicators that, hey, we need to start putting some work in. Okay? And how do we start supporting these children? Number one, take them to places like our next door neighbor, the Greenwell Group. They are mild oral functional specialists. They help basically do OT and PT for your tongue, mouth, ears, nose, throat. Maybe not ears, excuse me. But helps to give them specific rehab and exercises that help to focus on the tonicity of these structures. Right? So they're right next door. Feel free to say hi to them. They're really good people. Number two, shameless plug, you got to fix your spine, okay? Specifically the upper cervical spine. We can work on cranial structures. We can work on the upper cervical structure that influences the brainstem. The brainstem is where the hypoglossal nerve is. The hypoglossal nerve is the nerve that coordinates movement of all these soft tissues in the sublingual tissue. So sometimes it's a structural issue. Sometimes it's a power issue, a neurologic issue. But if we work on both of those together, we usually get a really cool outcome. This also helps to reduce tension on the nervous system and help get the body into a state of relaxation. And then if we need to get a little bit more advanced than that, there are interesting things that are being studied now, like palate expanders, preventative oral devices that you can wear really all the time that continue to mimic or simulate that chewing mechanism in order to continue to drive a mechanical force. And Nestor actually did this. And as an adult, because in school we were taught that we can't really change the shape of the skull, right? Because the sutures fuse after a certain age. It's argued between 5 to 8 years, at least that's what I was taught. But Nestor, experimenting on himself, did pre and post imaging studies and showed, significant improvement in his airways, significant improvement in the expansion of his bone. So there are stem cells in these tissues that the body can continue to remodel the tissue over time, as long as we apply load and stress to the tissue. So preventative oral devices, which should be done with a recommendation of a physician. But if we use these intermittently, like 15 to 20 minutes at a time throughout the day with controlled breathing exercises, you can actually change facial structure, oral structure, even as an adult, to help improve things like your sleep habits. Okay? And then we can get off those dang CPAP machines, which are blowing 100% O2 in our system. And now you should realize that that is not
Good.
Yeah. Yep, we're not getting oxygen into tissues. Okay. Nighttime mouth breathing, hormones, and your kidneys. So who here, well, it's a little embarrassing, you don't have to shit. But think to yourself, if you get up and pee like more than 2 times a night, this is why. Okay. Hormone disruptions. Okay. If you're a mouth breather, your body will start to release something called antidiuretic hormone, which causes your kidneys to dump salt and fluid, which means I need to wake up and pee. Okay. Mouth breathing is the reason why you are having multiple sleep disturbances throughout the night or contributing to nocturnal polyuria. So if we want to sleep through the night effectively, and who came to our sleep talk? Cool. If we don't sleep effectively, more than 8 hours in 3 consecutive nights, our natural killer cells drop by 30-40%, which means we get what? Cancer. Okay. Dry mouth, thirst, and frequent nighttime urination. So it goes through that process of antidiuretic hormone and what happens with atrial natriuretic peptide. So between the heart and the kidneys, what happens with that breath is, again, we just have to wake up and pee all the time and end up with dryness, specifically of our mouth, ears, nose, throat, irritations, bleeds. And it's not just aging. You can't sleep because you're getting old. It's really your airway hormones, kidneys, and neurology. Okay. Breath, blood sugar, metabolism, and weight manage. So chronic stress puts us in a fight or flight mechanism. When we're in a fight or flight mechanism, we want to produce a whole lot more cortisol. We start to mess with our balances of leptin and ghrelin, which is appetite suppressing and a hormone released from our fat cells. And so if we are mouth breathers, the probability is you will carry quite a bit more weight on your body. Okay. Also contribute to insulin sensitivities and resistances. So a couple cool things here is don't eat in fight or flight mode. Take 1 minute prior to breathing, going through that sacred rhythm rate or that ideal rhythm rate of 5 in, 5 out before meals to shift the brain, shift the neurology to a rested state. If we get more enzymatic secretion from our saliva and our salivary glands, our body will do a better job interacting with food and breaking the food down. And if you're an acid reflux sufferer, you need more enzymatic function. And so this is one way that you can biohack yourself to help your body to balance out acids and bases and produce more enzymes. Also, you can do this supplementally through digestive enzymes if you guys need help with that. Also, as we age, our body does get just metabolically less efficient over time. That's why we all, love Jesus. So typically we do need various supplemental supports as we age in order to help accelerate these processes. But digestive enzymes, extremely cost effective and wildly beneficial to the digestive system. Right? Breathe before you binge. When cravings hit you, specifically after 8 p.m., do 1 to 2 minutes of box or resonant breathing, 5 in, 5 out, because that can help regulate that stress response and maybe curb that craving. And then pair breath with movement. This will help with that CO2 intolerance because as we move, we have a harder time regulating our breath. So the more aerobically active you can be and the more you can dampen your breathing response, the more CO2 tolerance you will develop and the better your nervous system and stress response will work. Cool. Advanced breathing tactics. HUMO, don't quite know how to pronounce it. I've done this last 2 nights and almost passed out both times. So proceed with caution. Okay? It actually says, do not do this driving, do not do this standing, do not do this. But have you ever heard of Wim Hof? Wim Hof, the Iceman, the guy who climbed Everest in shorts and sandals, no frostbite, no nothing. Oh man. So you guys should check out him. He's a super cool guy. He does a version of this with severe cold exposure in order to, he's helped hundreds of thousands of people cure themselves of all sorts of interesting diseases. You should really check him out. There's a documentary on this. There's a book on this. It's called The Iceman. Really cool. So basically, he took this Tibetan meditative breathing practice and kind of modified it for the modern age. But this is why, have you guys ever seen videos of like monks sitting in the snow with like no shirts on and like all the snow's melted around them? Okay, so this breathing practice is the opposite of everything I just taught you. Okay? This ramps up our sympathetic nervous system. This stresses the body out intensely. But if we can do it to ourselves versus having somebody do it like an environmental stimuli doing it to us, it increases our tolerance and resiliency. Okay, so this has been shown to actually increase your body temperature by about 20 degrees, and some people can actually move. Like, I don't know how they do it, but through a year of the practice, they can make the left side of their body like 30 degrees warmer than the right side of their body through like this Como breathing practice. Okay. I did this again for like 3 to 5 minutes. I'm like, I'm going to pass. So it's very powerful rhythmic breathing. It requires very strong engagement of the core muscles. deep mental focus because you are putting yourself through an very uncomfortable experience. So we're not here turning into monks, and there's a very, softer way to go through this in order to help balance this out for you. Okay. So here's how Tuomo works. Intense pattern breathing and core activation can shift the autonomic nervous system into a high sympathetic arousal. You'll feel warm, you'll feel heat, you'll feel flushed. It's going to increase your heart rate pretty significantly and increase your CO2 levels. Okay, basically you are like deep inhales, deep exhales, violent squeezing your abdomen. And if you do that for like 3 to 5 minutes, you're going to feel very lightheaded. You're going to start to feel sweaty. You're going to start to feel flushed. You're going to start to feel really hot. Yes. But then if you can do that very aggressively and then default very quickly to the 5 in, 5 out, and in your mind's eye, because I love the samurai analogy, think of a feather under your nose and you're trying to breathe with such delicacy that the feather is not going to move. And if you can shift back and forth between those two states, you can apparently do some really amazing things with your nervous system of strength, endurance, dramatically upregulating your immune system. Because it was Wim Hof. They took him in a lab, they injected him with E. coli. And then he went through a 12-month breathing practices and it was completely cleared from his system in like 6 hours. Yeah, I know, right? Super stinking cool. So again, there's documentary on this guy. It's really neat. But warning, advanced breath holds or intense breathing should be avoided or medically cleared in people with cardiovascular disease, uncontrolled blood pressure, pregnancy, or seizure history. Okay? So that's the guy. Super awesome. Love reading about him because he just does some really amazing things. He hosts workshops all over the world. You can go hang out with him for like 2 weeks and climb a mountain with shorts on and regulate body temperature and do all sorts of cool stuff. But I thought this was kind of cool and well timed reading this book. So I was like, oh, yeah. Vitalis just opened next door, and guess what they have? Contrast therapy, cold immersion therapy, saunas. So you can put yourself in cold and hot polarities and exposures. And if you can do that while practicing various breathing activities, you're going to dramatically see an improvement in your resiliency in your body. So research shows trained practitioners can influence their autonomic nervous system and regulate inflammation, change pain receptors, stress responses during extreme cold exposures. So again, this guy climbed Everest, no oxygen support, in sandals and cargo shorts with no issue. So it works. Okay. All right. Safe Tuomo. If you guys want to do this in a more easier, palatable way. Okay. Stand tall, feet flat, spine long, jaw relaxed. Power breaths for 30 to 45 seconds, and you will get a response from doing this. Inhale through the nose with strong belly expansion and exhale through the nose with force activation. Snap into the belly, pull in hard. Okay. And then gentle hold. So once you exhale all the way after doing this for 30 to 45 seconds, you want to do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you're going to feel that CO2 intolerance build inside your body. And then that recovery phase of getting your body back to a parasympathetic arrested state. This is very similar to running. This is very similar to physical fitness. This is very similar to really any stress that you apply to the body. The more stress you apply to the body, the harder you push it and the faster you can recover. That elastic zone, that plasticity is truly one of the best measures of human performance and health. Because the faster you can recover from variable stressors, the better your body does repairing tissue at a cellular level. Okay? So that's how that can be done in a more safe and practiced manner, but please do it safe. Okay? And so free divers are a really good proof of this because they can dive for 8 to 10 minutes on a single breath. These people are not genetically special by any means also. They did harp on that consistently. Really, we just need to be very good at getting to a state of relaxation. They can dive to depths of 100 to 130 meters or 430 feet deep without having any issues. Be underwater for about 10 minutes at a time. And these are just normal people that have trained themselves to work through these breathing mechanics effectively. So guys, that's what I have for you this evening. In summary, breath training and breathing training can be incredibly powerful and helpful to your healing process in reference to your inflammatory load, your immune markers, your cardiovascular system. breathing's kind of recommended across every medical circle. It's just there's different ways to do it, right? So there's a more beneficial way, less beneficial way. What I want to empower you guys with or challenge you guys with this evening is if anybody wants to work through some of this stuff and continue to measure your HRV scores, let me know. I think that'd be really fun and cool to do together if you guys would like to do that. But ultimately, if you have chronic pain, neuropathy, migraines, long-term fatigue, soreness, dizziness, all sorts of whatever variable issues, this is just a really basic foundational practice that you can implement at any point in time throughout the day. All it just takes is a little intention, and you can start to shift yourself towards a better state of health by addressing root causes to variable diseases that we all experience. Cool. If this piques your interest and you want to take this a little bit further, you'd like to dive into a full structural evaluation, I believe everybody here is already practice members, so no pressure on that. Please allow us to have the opportunity to feed into your family members, your loved ones. If you're under care, but you've never had your husband or wife assessed or your children assessed, I would ask why. So make sure that we are getting them set up in for initial evaluations that we can help them to start to address some of these underlying issues. So ultimately we can prevent all the crap from happening in the future anyways. And if you guys need a good referral to help you to gain a better understanding of myofascial structure, breathing mechanics, you want to look into like corrective orthotics, like palate expanders. I have resources and references for all of this, so please just ask. I can get you guys plugged into the right people. If you're a sleep apnea person, you're tired of the CPAP machine, you want to find a different way to do it, this is a good place to start. So we want to breathe in the new year with some good new health practices, and our family as always looks forward to partnering with yours to get to the root cause of your health concerns. And again, if you guys like this kind of information, you want it other places besides here, not that I don't love seeing your beautiful faces, but I really enjoy having the opportunity to feed into your guys' lives. But if you want this information other places, churches, youth groups, moms groups, Girl Scouts, wherever you guys want, I'm happy to take this out to the public and provide these in a much more consolidated manner for your businesses and bring you guys food or anything that you guys want to do with that. Okay, cool. I do have some gifts for you guys this evening because I know I get to have the opportunity to care for a lot of you. If you would like, feel free to hand this to your loved ones and your family members. That is a discounted assessment here in the office. You can give them the gift of health this holiday season. They can bring it in and redeem that for a discounted assessment here in the office. Okay. If you guys want to pick up the book, it'll be in our lending library, so feel free to check it out if you want to read it. Just please bring it back. We do keep track of that, so we do appreciate that they do make their way back to us. Okay. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Have fun practicing your breathing. Again, that sacred resonance happens at 5.5 inhale, 5.5 exhale, and that's probably the best place to start. Cool. Thank you.
Podcast.
Yeah, for sure. I get invited to be on podcasts from time to time. So that's very good. Yeah, one day.
We've got Andrew.
Yeah.
Here's some
I heard you doing a podcast. Oh, yeah. See, that's super cool. Congratulations, man. Somebody told me that the other day. It's like buying this game. Yeah.
What is it?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Setting.
We're going to do some recording. It's awesome.
Some of that, as far as the we had
Oh, I like your big.
Less than a month. I've had it for years. For coming in.
That system is built. I'll shoot you.
It's the real deal.
Yeah. Of course.
Bye, Lisa. You too. So that was the. So, look. I read.
Just talking about that. She wanted.
And let's say. So I'm going to just to that. This company that it's the things that I finally come to terms with, I feel like it's somebody, I'm trying. I was, not. Yeah, anything involved with things you should be doing. And so. Right. Generate. Did you? Yeah. I talked to my community. I said, you know what? Yeah. But it she said, what? She said, I know we don't offer. Just, you know, me, like chaos, and I said, well, you know, have that.
It was still very
Yeah.
My first state, and I made it here. Hard, so not only
Yeah.
So if you
You know.
Well, yeah, I think they're getting some. Thursday, next week too. And they get a weekend, but we was close to Christmas. Spring. Then it's a good time. Our auction is to be, so I'll get it. Thanks. Yeah, cause I but I can tell it's much easier.
But it's like.
It basically resets your, but
Yeah. So this one's. And nothing up here.
See the book, right? The book's awesome. Check out the book.
On meditation.
Nine.